Hey friends, it's Jessica from Three Rivers Homestead, and I'm back with another weekly video for you. I'm just going to catch you up on all the stuff that we've been doing around the homestead, so why don't we go ahead and get started. In this video, I'm going to show you some kitchen projects that I was up to. I'm going to kind of give you a freezer tour. We're also going to do a tour of the garden, and then I'm going to show you our new setup for moving our cows. We have a new alleyway that we created, and we had to bring a cow to harvest this week using it, so I wanted to show you how that worked out. But let's go ahead and get started with a garden tour first. The garden is a mess this time of year. I've spent too much time in the kitchen, not a lot of time outside weeding. You can definitely see that, but our greens are producing lots of chard, lots of kale. We won't complain about that. You can see our fall plantings of potatoes are flowering. I haven't had a chance to hill them, but we will harvest whatever we can. There's food amongst these weeds, and we're just, gonna take whatever we can get. I've preserved enough calendula for my soap making and salve making, so the bees are getting to enjoy the rest of that. Lots of pole beans still producing. I need to get out here and pick some of those. And then okra. Okra here will continue to produce all the way through October until the frost. We have quite a jungle of that growing, and that's Adam's favorite vegetable. So very happy about that. The winter squash some of it is ripened and ready to be cured and stored, and then we still have new fruits that are forming. So that's exciting. Lots of chive blossoms. The bees are very happy this time of year. There is so much food for them. And then just odds and ends there. I can make more nasturtium salt. We have tons of herbs that we need to preserve. We have new sprouts coming up with the lettuce and carrots and radishes and turnips and parsnips and all of the fall crops that I've planted. So it's just that time of year. I'm running out of steam, but it's still a productive garden. And every day we just go out and we fill up bowls and baskets of what is available. We'll eat fresh from this. This is our grocery shopping, and then anything that's left over, we find a way to preserve it. And the freeze dryer is really helpful for that, doing small batches of preservation. We're also doing some bulk preservation projects, and I'll show you that here. So at this point of the year, we still have pears to preserve, and I will do those this week, much like peaches, into pie filling and slices that I'll can. I have them ripening in my family room right now. And then tomatoes, we're still freezing them in gallon bags and saving those up to do some batches of tomatoes. But it's not all work here. There is time for play. We're trying to soak up the sunshine in these last days of summer because pretty soon here we are going to be in the full swing of school. We've already eased back into kind of a semi-school schedule, and pretty soon it will be full force with 5 students. Levi here is my newest pupil. He is in kindergarten this year. Very exciting. Quickly, I wanted to catch you up on my vinegar projects. You'll remember in week 4 of the Every Bit Counts challenge, I started a batch of red wine vinegar, so I took it down this week, just checking it for smell and any signs of mold or anything, and it's looking good, so that will go back up on the shelf to continue to ferment. Here's my peach pit vinegar that I started in week 3 of the Every Bit Counts challenge, and you can see that this is already forming a mother of vinegar. That's the colony of bacteria that aids in the fermentation. You can see it's kind of yucky. It's got some sediment on it, but this is not moldy. There's nothing wrong with this. It's still a healthy culture of bacteria that will cause no harm. But it has been 2 weeks that this has been sitting in this jar here, so it is time for me to strain out the peach pits and put this in a new clean container to finish the fermentation process. So that is what I'm going to do on this day. I'm just going to get out a funnel and a strainer, and we're just going to pour the liquid out of this jar, leaving the peach pits behind. And then what we will do after that is cover it back up, put it back up in a cupboard or on a counter, and let this ferment for another 4 to 6 months. And at the end of that, we will have a nice, powerful vinegar that we can use for salad dressings. I use peach vinegar anywhere that I would use apple cider vinegar. It just has more of a peach hint to it. There's our leftover pits that the chickens will enjoy picking the flesh off of, the fruit off of. And then, as I mentioned, we need to cover this back up. And when we cover it, we want something breathable to continue the fermentation process. My old coffee filter was kind of yucky, So I'm grabbing a new clean coffee filter. We're just going to put that on tap, secure it, and then we'll be ready to go. So as I mentioned, these homemade vinegars, these can be used anywhere that you would use an apple cider vinegar. It's just really good for you. Nice little probiotic treat. Add it to your water, use it in your cooking or your baking, use it in your canning even if you wanted to test the pH to make sure it was at least at 5% acidity. So many uses, and this is so cheap to make. It was made from scraps, so it's essentially free. And that amount of vinegar would cost me a fortune if I were buying it in the store. So as I mentioned, we took one of our beef heifers to harvest. We took her to the butcher this week. We had to create a new system for moving cows on our property after having some bad experiences. So we created this corral over here, you can see. It's attached to our pastures. We get a lot of questions about this. We have about a little under 2 acres of pasture here, and it's divided into half, so we can rotate as needed. And we usually only keep about 2 beef cows out on that pasture at any given time. So they have about an acre each, and that is enough that we don't need to supplement with much hay. And as you can see, this girl is ready to go. She's been in the corral for the last 24 hours, and then we built an alleyway attached to the corral that leads up to our driveway where the trailer is. And this will be much easier for moving them. Here you can see Adam backs the trailer right up to the entrance of that alleyway. This will make for very easy loading, stress-free. We don't have to worry about cows getting loose or dragging people across the property. Tom here is just enjoying a bone, getting ready for the action of moving this cow. Here's the end of that alleyway. The gate at the end opens up so that we can load directly into it. And then the great thing is we plan to use this alleyway and corral area when we're not using it to load beef up. This will be a great puppy run. If we ever have another litter of puppies, we could also use it as another chicken run. You can see there's lots of space back here. It's always great to have fenced in areas on the property. So we're very excited about this project. And we're going to show you how this worked out for us loading her up. Sometimes you have a problem haltering animals, and if you have an animal that isn't extremely personable, this is a much easier solution for us. So there she is. There is our heifer, and I'm going to show you how we moved her. Some of you are probably wondering why we don't butcher our own beef here on the property, and first it's because we lack a lot of the necessary equipment to get that done, like a forklift and a meat locker and some of the saws and things that would be necessary. And it's just something, we can't do everything ourselves. There are some things that we prefer to outsource. So we grow our own beef, but we prefer to have someone else butcher it and package it up for us. For now, that's just something that we like to do. So Adam is using, there's something called a rattle paddle here, and he's not harming her. It has shakers, like a rattle on the end of it, that just kind of makes them want to move. It's a little gentler than some of the other methods. Some people will twist the cow's tail to get them to move forward, and that rattle paddle definitely keeps us from having to do that. So Adam's just trying to get her to move. She's very curious about all of the new grass and trees and greenery. Gabe is very unsuccessfully trying to lure her with some grain to get her into the trail, and it just took a little patience. In all, this process took us about 30 minutes, which was a whole lot easier than it had been in previous times trying to halter an animal and walk them across our yard, because our pasture is all the way over on the other side of the property from where our driveway is. Eventually, Adam decided to get a cattle panel and kind of try to walk behind her with the cattle panel to kind of move her forward, because if she would look behind her and see him standing there with the barrier, then she realized she couldn't move back. This isn't an ideal solution, because if we had a stubborn, a less docile animal that wanted to move backwards, Adam could very easily get hurt just using this cattle panel. So in the future, we'll find something a little more sturdy and permanent to kind of put behind her to force her forward. But as I said, it only took her about 30 minutes, so I'm very pleased with this process. The hardest part was getting her to get up into the trailer. You know, we tried luring her in with grain. We tried lots of different things. And ultimately, it just took Adam using all of his force from behind to just kind of push her. Trying the rattle paddle again, she was just not interested. So you'll see here, Adam just kind of used his weight behind her, and eventually she went in, and we got it done. So our family can easily eat 1.5 to 2 cows worth of beef in a year, very easily with what's soon to be a 10-person family. So our other beef heifer will be processed in about another month and a half. And so my job here is going to be to clear out the freezer. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do to accomplish that here soon. But we were happy for a successful loading, as stress-free as possible for our cow here, and she is headed off to the butcher. We are very grateful. It's kind of a sad day in many ways because we do get attached to these animals. We're caring for them every day, and we do take good care of our animals while we have them, but they aren't pets. We are raising them for meat, and we know that we are grateful for the sacrifice that this cow will make to feed my family, and we cared for her during this part of our life, and now through her sacrifice, she will care for us. So that is just part of the process of being a meat eater, and we are grateful for the opportunity to have such a hand in that process. I do have one child in particular that is very sensitive to this, and every time one of our larger animals goes off to the butcher, she gets very sad and won't eat meat for about, 2-3 weeks afterwards. We just give her that space and let her have those feelings, and eventually she forgets about it and wants to eat the burgers and the steak with the rest of the family. But there's no pressure. I just want my kids to enjoy this process and, not have negative feelings or associations, and we're just trying our best. So, all right, that was an exciting day of getting her all loaded up. So as I mentioned, now I have my hands full. We have 2 big freezers. We have a big commercial freezer. We have a small chest freezer. And then we do have a small stand-up freezer, mostly for vegetables and fruits inside of the house. But here we go. Here is our commercial freezer. And then I'll show you this, the chest freezer in a second. But I need to fit, by the end of the year, 2 whole cows in here. And then we just had 3 pigs that we picked up from the butcher as well. So it is packed in here, you guys. And this is extremely embarrassing when you see this mess. You can see up there we have a lot of lemonade on the top shelf, frozen lemon juice for lemonade. Lots of our chicken that we did in our first butchering in the middle of the summer. Most of this is all pork. There's some frozen broth. That top shelf over on the left is all bones. And I don't know where I am going to fit a whole cow, you guys. I have a serious problem. Here's the little chest freezer. I'll show you what we have in here. This side's all full of our fish, the wild for salmon. This is our favorite salmon, and I do have a code to get 10% off, and I will leave that in the description of this video for you if you're interested in some wild-caught Alaskan salmon. We have over here, this is just the little bit of beef that's left over from last year's heifer that we had processed last summer. And then this is all pork. The bottom underneath it just has some odds and ends. So what I needed to do today was go through and start clearing out. This is going to be my job for the next 3 weeks because we get our cow back in 3 weeks from the butcher. So I need to make space. Every day I'm going to work to kind of clear and make a little more space. Otherwise I'm going to end up canning a lot of beef. So let me show you what I pulled out. Here are my cashews. I buy my cashews in bulk from Azure Standard, and I get them in pieces, which is much cheaper than whole cashews. And I do that because I mostly use these to just make milk and some dairy-free like cheeses and pesto, things like that. I store the cashews once they're thawed out in a jar over here on my pantry shelf, and as you can see, I was getting low, so I pulled out a gallon of those cashew pieces to go ahead and refill that. But I store them in the freezer because nuts are very high in oil and will go rancid if sitting out. And so I think I have probably 4 more gallons in there. I need to start going through cashews to make that space. Another thing I found in the bottom of the freezer was my soft white wheat berries. This is just 25 pounds. I always freeze my grains. You can see I accidentally ripped a hole in this getting it out, but I freeze my grains before I put them in my pantry to kill any potential pest eggs that could be in there. It's just kind of best practice. And so I'm going to let these thaw for about 24 hours to make sure there's no condensation that could cause molding. And then we'll get those in a bucket. And I grind these wheat berries down to make flour for our baking. The next thing that I'm working on clearing out is a lot of the organ meat. So I pulled out a bunch of liver. This is liver that from our homegrown meat, and we also have some friends that have cows butchered and they don't like to eat liver, so they give us theirs. We barter for that with other things, and I really like to eat liver. It's very good for you. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with that. I'm actually going to make a shelf-stable liver powder out of it, and this is how I sneak liver into my children's food. I put it in smoothies, meatballs, hamburgers, pasta sauce, you name it, and I sprinkle that in, and it's like a vitamin for my children and for my pregnant self, because when I'm pregnant, I don't really like to eat liver, but I need to eat liver. All right, and here is a bag of frozen bones. These are pig bones. So we keep all the bones of the animals that we have processed, pigs, cows, chickens, and I make broth from them, but I don't prefer pork broth, and so we save the pork bones for the dogs, and that's who's going to get those today. Every fall, I freeze gallons of apple cider, and we have 2 gallons left that were kind of forgotten in the back of the freezer. They're taking up space, so I'm thawing that for dinner today. And then here is that lemon juice. Every winter in January, I freeze lemons, squeezed lemons. I think I did 4 bushels this year, and then that is my lemon juice that I'll use for lemonade and other things throughout the rest of the year. So I'm going to get that thawed out, and I'll show you how I make my lemonade here later on in this video. All right, to clear up some space, I also pulled out a ham here. We have 3 pigs worth of ham, so we need to get eating this. I get mine fresh and whole, none of the curing agents or anything added to this. This is just a fresh ham, and I'm going to show you how I prepare this. We like to cook one of these up, and then we can eat off it for a couple days, making sandwiches and things. And so I really need to get busy and purpose to do that at least once a week until I get those cleared out, because as you can see, they take up a lot of space in the freezers. Just grab some bacon to eat this weekend. We'll get that thawed out, and we'll have that for breakfast over the weekend. I found a bag of pork fat that I need to render down into lard. So I will show you that process here in a minute on how I do that. Also found 3 random bags of fruit. I have a bag of sliced apples, some peaches, and pears, and that is the last of the fruit from 2021. I'm going to turn this into some fruit sauce for the kids to eat as a snack today and tomorrow. And here were just some random veggies. I have no idea where these came from. They were at the very bottom of my chest freezer, and you can see half the bags were kind of ripped open, and the veggies are all freezer burned. I don't remember how these ended up in my freezer, but the chickens, these will get thawed and will not get wasted. The chickens will enjoy this. This was some zucchini from last year that got forgotten. That's extremely unfortunate, and somehow the bag became opened, so it's all freezer burned and gross. But when you have animals, there is nothing that goes to waste. We'll just turn those veggies into eggs to enjoy. So yeah, I cleared out quite a bit of space in the freezer, as you can see here. So now I'm going to take you along on how I'm going to process all of this food. Let's start with those fruit slices. So as I mentioned, I have pears, peaches, and apples, putting those in a big stock pot. Here I've got my pork fat in a crock pot. I've got that on low. And in both of these things, the crock pot and the stock pot, I put just a little bit of water on the bottom to prevent sticking and burning. Now, once the fruit had thawed a little bit and softened, I got out my immersion blender and I just hit it with the blender to kind of get it all smoothed up and mixed together. We're going to add a little bit of cinnamon here, and then the kids are going to have this today as a snack. I
normally don't can fruit sauce until a little later in the fall when things slow down. I will do applesauce in probably October or November, but my kids really love fruit sauce like this. It's just nice. We usually serve it warm with cinnamon or nutmeg or something like that. Such a great snack. As you can see, the kids are certainly enjoying that. And so that's what I do when I kind of get tired at the end of the preserving season. If I have the freezer room, which I will not have this year, I slice up my fruit and just toss it into freezer bags, put it in the freezer, and then I can process it later on in the fall. And sometimes those bags of fruit get forgotten, as was the case here, but no worries, we eventually get to it. Here are those pork bones that I mentioned, and those obviously do not go to waste. We have 3 big dogs here that love them, and they especially love it when they're kind of frozen here on these hot days, because not only do they get the treat of the bone, but they cool down, and so they get fed raw bones here. I try to do this as a treat a couple times a week for them, and the dogs seem to really appreciate it. There's our baby puppy, Harry. And then there's his mom, Leela, right there. She's about 4.5 years old. And there is Harry's dad, Tom, right next to her. He's 3 years old. And those are our livestock guardian dogs. We love them. And time to get to the liver. Yum, yum. Actually, Adam loves liver. He likes it when I bread it and fry it and cook it with caramelized onions. I like that when I'm not pregnant, but I have a severe aversion to the flavor when I'm pregnant. So we are going to freeze dry this liver instead. And so what I do is when it's still kind of partially frozen, it's much easier to cut. So I just slice it up like this and fill up my freeze dryer trays with the partially frozen liver. Let me show you how thick they are. They're about maybe at the most a 1/2 inch thick. You don't want it too thick or you're going to have a really hard time getting it dried. It's going to take forever to get it dried in the middle. At this thickness, it only took me maybe 16 hours. After it's done, I'll show you the next step. In the meantime, let me show you a quick dinner prep. On this day, I went ahead and grabbed some of that salmon that I mentioned. Once again, you can find the code for discount on your salmon in the description of this video. I also went out to the garden. We got some okra and green beans. I sliced up a cabbage from our garden. And here I'm going to make our lemonade for dinner. So what I do to make my lemonade is I take about a pint of that thawed lemon juice. And then I'm going to pour that into this jug right here. It holds about 1 quart of water. So I use a pint of lemon juice to 1 quart of water. And then I use about 1 cup of sugar or so. Maybe a little more, about 1.25 cups, and I mix all of that together in my jug here. And this is a treat we have at least once a week throughout the year, just something different for the children. To it, I will add some freeze-dried lemon slices, freeze-dried blueberries. Sometimes I'll add frozen strawberries if I have them. They just add a little extra flavor. And we're going to have this with our dinner here. So here's what that looked like. Let me show you everything. I have about 1/2 jug of the apple cider left so the kids can pick between apple cider and then the lemonade. As you can see, those blueberries turned it a really pretty purple color. The kids will enjoy that. With that, we're going to have some rice. I cooked that in some leftover broth from a beef roast the other day, so that really made that rice flavorful and nutritious. I sauteed that cabbage up in a little bit of bacon grease. That gives it some good flavor. Then I breaded this okra and also fried that up in a little bit of bacon grease. I steamed my green beans, so we have a healthy non-fried vegetable. There's some steamed green beans with a little garlic salt, and then I just baked the salmon with a little Old Bay seasoning on top on 350 for about 30 minutes or so. And that is what we enjoyed for dinner on this day. As I mentioned, our pork fat had been in the crock pot and it sat all overnight, and by the next morning it was melted enough. It was about half melted so that I could skim off the liquid fat from the top. I put a strainer in there to catch any of the solids from going into my jar. And I have a whole video on rendering lard and tallow, and I will link that video in the description. It teaches you all about the health benefits of lard, of animal fat. It's a great dietary source of lots of vitamins, As a dairy-free family, this is extremely valuable to us because we can't have butter, so this is a great cooking fat. And as you can see, as it cools, it turns snow white, and we have beautiful lard. We tend to store it in our fridge to extend the shelf life, but it can be shelf stable. All right, guys, time to work on that ham that I mentioned. So I have some salt, I have some garlic cloves, I have a little bit of olive oil, I have some mustard, we have parsley, sage, crushed red pepper, and then a little bit of just regular black pepper. We're going to get all of this in the food processor and kind of make a paste out of it. Here's what our paste looks like when it's all done. And we're going to use this as a rub on our ham. Now remember, my ham was a raw ham, and this drives me nuts when the meat inspectors stamp your beautiful meat with this ink. And they say it's food safe, but I don't like it on my meat, so I have to cut it out now. I don't know why they have to do that. It's really frustrating. So anyways, what I'm going to do first before we put our rub on our meat is I'm going to pour a little bit of apple cider over this. I had it left over from the night before. And then as I baste my ham later on, that apple cider will add a little extra flavor and sweetness. So just pouring some of that on. And then once that's done, I'm adding that rub that I just showed you and just kind of patting it on, getting it to stick there. Just getting it on there as best I can. And that will give it a great herb, garlic flavor. Has that mustard in it. That's how it looks when we've got it all covered. Not the prettiest at this point, but it's going to taste delicious. So I'm going to put this on about 260 in the oven for most of the day. This was roasting. And then after about 6 or 7 hours, I took it out of the oven and I poured a little bit of maple syrup over the top. And then I stuck it back in the oven on 350 just for about a half an hour to help kind of brown the outside of that and turn that maple syrup into a glaze. And this is what it looked like. There you go. It's nice and juicy. The flavor was amazing. We're going to get this sliced up so everybody can eat this on sandwiches. Now, it's ideal to slice your ham perpendicular to the bone, but the way this ham was configured, I guess, that just wasn't a convenient way to cut it. So I'm cutting it in a way that you're not supposed to cut it on this day, but you know what? We had thicker slices than it would be if I cut it perpendicular, but it still tasted amazing. And so the kids just grabbed one of these slices per sandwich, and we ate off of this for 2 days. We had it for 2 separate meals, and that was delicious. Sliced up some watermelon to have with our sandwiches. All right, our freeze-dried liver is all done. Let me show you the next step here. As you can see, it's perfectly dried. It just breaks right apart, and doing it in the freeze dryer doesn't smell as bad as it does in the dehydrator. If you've ever done liver in the dehydrator, it can be a stinky process. This isn't so bad. I just put those chunks in my Ninja blender here. I don't really have a fancy blender. A Ninja does the trick, and it will powder it up perfectly like this. Then I can get this in my jars, and this liver powder is shelf stable, and we will use this for the next 9 months or so. And every time I want to give the kids a little bit of a vitamin boost in their food, we'll just add a scoop to their meal. So as I mentioned, we use it in smoothies. I'll add it to meatballs or hamburger patties, just anywhere where I think I can kind of hide the taste. And as long as you don't use too much, they will never know that there is liver in their food. And it's just a great way to make that liver that you get in your animal not go to waste. And this is just really good for you, especially as a pregnant woman. I need to be eating some of this every week, if not more often. Try to get it as often as I can. So just lots of garden work to tie up, lots of kitchen work and preservation work. You guys know me, that's what we've been up to around here.
All right, and that's what we were able to accomplish this week. Busy, busy time of year, lots of preservation happening, lots of different projects we're trying to accomplish. So I'll be back next week with another video to kind of take you along with everything else that we're doing. Until then, I hope you have a blessed week. We'll talk to you later, friends. Bye.